Good morning. Welcome to Kingsport News Hour for the 29th day now in the 11th month by the heavenly calendar in the 16th year of Changi. Tomorrow is the last day of the 11th month, and then on Monday we will begin the 12th month. And we have just 1 month then through the 12th month. Once we get through that, we'll have God's Day, of course, on February 17th. Let's go through our trip around the kingdom right now. And right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, 37 degrees, mostly cloudy. Breezy this morning with a couple of showers, otherwise times of sun and clouds, high of 46 today. Tonight, mostly cloudy, low of 25. Father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan province in Korea, clear 11 degrees. Real feel, though, of 2 degrees below zero. So very cold temperatures continuing there. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy, low of 5 degrees. And tomorrow, cloudy most of the time and high of 28. At the Turnagain Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, cloudy and 25. Snow into the early afternoon. Storm total snowfall 1 to 3 inches and high of 34 today. Tonight, partly cloudy, low of 24. And at the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground, Limestone County, Texas, 35 degrees and clear. 50 degrees for a high today, mostly sunny, breezy, and cooler. Gusty winds, low humidity, and dry brush result in a high fire threat. Tonight, clearing and cooler, low of 23. At the Suncheon Palace in Korea, 36 degrees and clear, remaining clear through the night, low of 26. Tomorrow, plenty of sunshine, high of 59. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 47 and clear, mostly clear through the night, and low of 33. Tomorrow, sunny, high 55. And in Guangzhou and Guangdong Province, China, 74 and cloudy. Partly cloudy tonight, getting down to 62 degrees. Tomorrow, very warm with a hazy sunshine, high of 82. And let's go to Father's Word. Let's see where we are today. And we're in human life and the world of the spirit, eternal world of the eternal spirit. Okay. We're in chapter 2, and the title of chapter 2 is What Kind of Place is the, or what is the spirit world like? What is the spirit world like? Chapter 2. And let's see here. We're in anyway, we're in chapter 2. Okay. We're in kind of in the middle of chapter 2. I can't find the end or the beginning. No, I guess we're in section 1. Okay, we're in section 1.4. All right. Praise God. All right. So if we are to be an object of true love, we must stand in the position of zero. But when Father says position of zero, he's talking about, position of nothingness, kind of like Zen, right? In Zen, they talk about sort of being in a position of nothingness. And that's what Father's also talking about, but he expresses it as a zero. When that happens, uh, when God looks at the physical world, then the physical world shines as brightly as the sun. And when those two, 그렇게 되면 원야원의 지상 세계를 보게 되면 지상의 태양같이 빛납니다. And when those two explode, the spirit world, 영계 하나님의 눈도 깜짝 놀란다는 것입니다. And then also God will be surprised. And so I don't know. There must be a context to this. Okay, it's difficult. Let's go to another one. Let's go to another paragraph because I don't know the context of this. All right, yeah, here we go. Over here. 그러면 남자는 뭐냐? So then, what is a man? Yes, yes. There we go. 이것은 그 절반뿐입니다. It is only half. A man is only half. 여자는 뭐예요? What is a woman? This also is just half. And no matter how high or high and mighty God may be, God also needs an object partner. object partner. So that is so we can say that the upper needs the lower, and then we say, well, what does the lower need? What is the spirit world? Spirit world is half of the world, and the physical world is also half of the world. So I was saying that uh, physical world and spirit world are each just half of God's creation, God of the cosmos, of the entirety of God's creation. And so there has to be a give and receive action. There has to be communication between those two. And I think one thing I've experienced as I've been in the United Church, or as I've been following Father, or studying his teachings for all these years, is that there is constant communication in a good way and a bad way between the spirit world and myself. Not all the spirit world that comes to me is the good spirit world, unfortunately, and there's a bad spirit world as well. And we need to figure out how to stick to one side and not the other, right? And that comes with experience, little by little experience. Okay, let's see what's going on here today's world. And let's see, just a sort of housekeeping situation, I guess. Trump says banks will soon begin distributing Trump cards. So apparently the way this is going to work is that banks are going to be giving out uh, separate cards from the ones that we already have. And these new cards are going to have a interest of 10%. So you know how from time to time you get an offer to transfer your balance to a card that charges no interest for maybe several months or maybe even a year. It's kind of like that, I think, kind of like that. Except that with those cards, once the promotion period is up, then the interest rate goes right up to the sky, right? 20 some percent or something like that, 30%. But I don't know how that's going to work with the 10% cards. So I guess people may be able to transfer balances to these 10% cards that the bank is going to give them. I'm still a little bit unclear on exactly how this is going to work. Um, let's see here. So it's not that our existing cards are going to get a 10% cap, it seems. So that's a little bit different from what we saw before. And President Trump is saying that this is going to be done by the banks voluntarily. He says, we've been in conversations with the big banks, with CEOs of many of the big banks who think that the president is onto something, that he's got a great idea, right? Okay. Banks could potentially voluntarily provide, let's bring this up a bit. Banks could potentially voluntarily provide for people who are in that sort of sweet spot. Sweet spot. Uh-huh. What does that mean? Not having, hold on a second, gotta wait. Okay. Not having financial leverage very much because they don't have access to credit, but they have enough income and stability in their lives that they're worthy of credit, has it said. And why aren't these people already getting credit cards? Because I think it actually, doesn't take a whole lot. It doesn't take a whole lot to get a credit card, especially if you have income. It says here income and stability, right? So if you have income and stability, and what they normally mean by stability is that you have a job that you've been in for, I don't know, a year, 2, 3 years, something like that, that you've been in your house for, you either own or rent your house, but you've been in that house for a while. That's what banks usually consider to be stability. And I would think that a person like that, if they have income and stability, they would already have credit cards if they want them. And if they don't want them, then why give them a new one? So, yeah, we'll see how this works out finally. But it looks like they're going to be handing out or sending out, or maybe sending out new cards. I don't know. I'll keep watching my mailbox. I don't know if I want one. Okay. Anyway, what I want to do is talk about more about Iran today. And there's some conflicting reports here because this is an AP story, I believe, and or anyway, this is one side of the story. Iran protests easing after deadly crackdown, according to rights group, plural there. And so, on the one hand, we see that, or we're told, and communicate that the internet has been knocked out, so communication is not what it should be. So we have to take everything with a grain of salt. But anyway, there is one side that is reporting that um, the protests seem to have been quelled, that the regime is winning or something like that, I guess, or at least it looks to be winning. Iran's deadly crackdown appears to have broadly quelled protests for now, according to a rights group and residents, as state media reported more arrests on Friday in the shadow of U.S. threats to intervene if killing continues. After President Donald Trump's repeated threats of military action against Iran in support of protesters, fears of a U.S. attack have retreated since Wednesday, when Trump said he'd been told killings in the crackdown were easy. U.S. allies, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, conducted intense diplomacy with Washington this week to prevent a U.S. strike, warning of consequences for the wider region that would ultimately impact the United States, a Gulf official said. Interesting that Saudi Arabia is kind of speaking up for Iran. They are usually, at each other's throats. The White House said on Thursday that Trump is closely monitoring the situation on the ground, adding that the president and his team have warned Tehran that there will be grave consequences if killings linked to its crackdown continue. Trump understands that 800 scheduled executions were halted. White House spokesperson Carolyn Levitt added, saying that the president was keeping all of his options on the table. Okay, so that's one side. Okay, on the other hand, we have someone warning that Iran may just sort of running into a very difficult situation. So Iran's regime may have one chance to save itself. It says, and this is kind of an in-depth analysis piece, and so let's go look at this. Iran's regime is on the ropes, it says. So this is a while ago we thought, wait a second, 30 seconds ago the regime was winning. Now they're on the ropes. So which is right? I don't know. The recent wave of protests, the government's bloody crackdown, and the U.S. threat of direct intervention all mark a profound turning point in its modern history. The Islamic Republic, and of course that's another word for Iran, the Islamic Republic's current trajectory is unsustainable without a course correction, a gradual internal disintegration of the economy, and the increasing reliance on force to suppress dissent will doom the government to a painful death, albeit a slow one. So even though the protests may have died down, the currency is still, in the dumps, in the trash can, basically, and people's money is basically worth nothing now. And so the symptom may have been suppressed, but the cause is still right there. So the disease, nothing's been done to cure the disease. For many, this has increased the possibility of regime change. At least some protesters seem to be supportive of Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the deposed Shah of Iran, who has openly auditioned for a leading role if the current government falls. But the events of the last 2 weeks also illustrate the obstacles to such a transformation. An impassioned but disorganized opposition, a brutal state willing to kill to maintain its position, a unified elite who will band together to save their regime rather than see it overthrown, and an international community hamstrung by a lack of options and resources. So, and this happens with, this was true, of course, in the Soviet Union as well. They had something they called the nomenklatura, and this happens in North Korea. It happens Well, it happens maybe in every country, and also in the United States, that you have an elite. You have an, right, in the United States, we have a governing elite, right, that has a vested interest in keeping the current system going, for better or for worse. And of course, the thing in the United States is that President Trump is kind of bashing that elite, and this is why they hate him. Um, but you have that elite in pretty much any country, I guess, where they have a certain system that's been going on for a number of decades. And their vested interests are very much involved in keeping the status quo. Sure, you can change people at the top and everything, but still, you want the basic status quo to continue. If change comes to Iran, it will likely come from within the system, an unsavory prospect as that might seem. So this makes sense. I think this makes sense because one thing, if you bring down the current system, or if the current system in Iran collapses, then what? Then what? Probably Pahlavi, the son of the deposed Shah, he is not in a position to go in and sort of pick up the reins of power, right? Because he has not been keeping in contact with people in Iran. Well, to some extent, he has, but not with a lot of people. The reason there was a transition from the Shah to the Islamic Republic is that Khomeini, the founder of this, Islamic Republic, was in Paris, and while he was in Paris in exile, he was sending cassette tapes into Iran and with his speeches. And these cassette tapes were widely distributed, much to the chagrin of the government at that time. And with those tapes, he was building a foundation for himself, and he was successful in doing that. People resonated to his message, whatever that message may have been. Right? It was actually a radical Islamic message, but anyway, people resonated to that message. It was also anti-American. It was also anti-royal, or anti the Shah, and so at one point, then he was able to create a revolution which overthrew the Shah, and of course they invaded the U.S. embassy and took a whole bunch of U.S. diplomats in hostage, and there was a whole mess involving that during the Carter administration. But based on that, based on the success of the revolution, Khomeini made a triumphal entrance into Iran and took control and established the current Islamic Republic. But the son of the Shah has nothing like that. And nobody else has anything like that. And that's a problem. That's a problem because when you tear something down and you're not building something up again, you don't know what's going to happen. Who's going to take control? It could be that the person who takes control is even worse than the people who are in there now, possibly. So history is replete with non-democratic governments course correcting to save themselves from destruction. Iran's leadership are well aware of their predicament, and there's likely a quiet consensus that the country must change its domestic and foreign policy to avoid a catastrophic slide into chaos and slow collapse. Right. So they're probably aware of that. Okay. There is one thing standing in their way: Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. So the guy at the top, he's the obstacle, right? Yeah, well, people, once you're in power, power is pretty nice, apparently. I don't know. But apparently, yes, once you're up there, it's hard to let go. Yes. Let's ask Hak Jahan for her opinion on this. Now 86 years old, Khamenei has held his post for more than 3 decades. Wow. So he was in his 50s when he took over. My goodness. It has not been a static role. Rather, Khamenei has used his post to shape the nizam, or system as the Islamic Republic's regime is generally known, and his position within it. A mid-ranking cleric and president during Iran's bloody war with Iraq, Khamenei was selected by the republic's founder, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, to be his successor as supreme leader in 1989. Khamenei was chosen for his revolutionary zeal rather than his seniority or managerial acumen. Initially, Khamenei was supreme leader, but not supreme. He had to share power with other political heavyweights. Most notably, Hassan Rafsanjani, who served as president throughout much of the 1990s. Rather than work within the existing system, Khamenei built a parallel one. He used the Beit-e-Rashbari, or Office of the Supreme Leader, to distribute patronage and largesse through a network of foundations that functioned as a shadow economy only his loyal supporters could access. With a shadow economy came a shadow army, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which grew from the Praetorian Guard of the Revolution into a military-industrial complex sprawling across much of Iran's economy. The IRGC is not just Iran's most powerful military outfit, smaller but better paid and equipped than the National Army or Artesh, but a conglomerate covering media, energy, construction, arms, and other industries, all closely linked to Khamenei's office and person. This is why Khamenei exercises such authority over the regime. It is not just because he is nominally supreme and commander-in-chief of the military, but because the country's richest and most powerful institutions and actors are linked to him through decades of association. In Venezuela, leader Nicolas Maduro's removal after a U.S. raid left room for the vice president to take over the government and quickly adjust policy to quell an immediate outside threat to the regime's rule. But so long as Khamenei is alive, his position atop the regime is unlikely to be challenged, as he is glue holding the Nizam together. A successful internal effort to sideline or remove him is hard to contemplate, even as the need for one has become self-evident. The Islamic Republic has reached a dead end. Already suffering from declining legitimacy, the regime has now suppressed a popular revolt with breathtaking violence. It cannot rule by force alone. Many of the elite know this and have been vocally expressing the need for reform, yet they always do so while paying obeisance to Khamenei, who remains the key decision maker. Many of those decisions look stubborn, even irrational. Khamenei won't condone direct talks with the U.S., nor will he permit Iran to back away from demanding the right to enrich uranium, despite the fact that a nuclear deal would bring desperately needed sanctions relief. He continues to decree support for Iran's regional proxies, including Hezbollah, which Iran supplied with some $1 billion last year, despite the fact that these groups have become liabilities that drain the country of badly needed cash. Khamenei shields corrupt figures within the network of the Ba'ath that stymies efforts to apply reform to the Islamic Republic's ramshackle civilian government. A rigid hardliner, he has dragged his feet on relaxing mandatory hijab for women, a religious head covering requirement enforced by state morality police, something many of the regime's elite acknowledge as necessary given how much it has become a rallying point for anti-government protests. And he is especially averse to opening Iran's political system to more competition and democratic accountability, directing the cleric-dominated Guardian Council to disqualify politicians he deems too liberal. He has been especially averse to allowing formerly popular figures linked to the 2009 Green Revolution to be rehabilitated, seeing them as dangerous rivals. Iran's transformation into a liberal democratic nation is likely the desire of most Iranians. It is unlikely to happen under the Islamic Republic. You know what this strikes me? This really strikes me as being very much parallel, shall we say, or maybe sort of a micro-macro relationship with the Family Federation under Hak Jahan. Because she is also the supreme leader, right? She's also the supreme leader. And she is also probably the biggest obstacle to reform. And she also, at least until she was in jail, she blocked any kinds of reform. Well, then now I'm hearing that now that she's in jail, maybe things are beginning to change inside the sort of the top ranks of the Family Federation. This is what I'm beginning to hear. But it's very similar because their constitution, if you look at their constitution, is it is a theocratic constitution where Hak Jahan and her sort of chosen lineage chosen representatives then exercise power. And anyone who's not loyal can be denied citizenship and so forth. And, and anyway, it's a very top-down organization, just like Iran is. It's the kind of theocracy that Iran is. And this is, of course, one reason why the current government in South Korea is reacting so strongly against Family Federation, because they say, wait a second, this is not what we want. We don't want to have anything to do with this. And anyone who's trying to establish a theocracy in this country has got to go. Anyway, we'll see we'll see how this plays out. But there is a similarity, kind of a micro-macro relationship. I don't know. On the evil side, could be, you're right. Could be. I have no idea. Anyway, let's see here. But a course correction that improves living conditions and rationalizes to some extent Iran's foreign policy is not impossible. And there is ample historical evidence of authoritarian systems taking that route to save themselves from disintegration. Yeah, and North Korea, of course, has done this kind of a thing. So to improve living conditions to some extent, at least for the people in Pyongyang, and also in some cities around the country as well, letting them have their sort of a markets, where they can sell things as they want in order to save themselves, save the system as a whole. Khamenei's advanced age makes it much likelier that Iran will have a chance to reorganize itself sooner rather than later once he departs the scene. Okay, provided the transition is relatively smooth. China under Deng Xiaoping embraced market reforms and pursued aggressive economic modernization following the chaos of the 1960s and early 1970s, with leader Mao Zedong's death in 1976 providing a key opening for long-deferred changes. Yeah, that's exactly true, yes. South Korea pursued economic modernization and democratization in the 1980s, following the one-man rule of Park Chung-hee. Well, I would, okay, I'm not so convinced of this, because Park Chung-hee himself, really set the foundations for economic growth. Yes, socially he was maybe more conservative than the majority of people would like to have been. He had, for example, there was a rule about how high a woman's skirt could go above the knee. And he actually had police going around with rulers. Yes. He had police going around with rulers. And the police would, this is in the 60s, I guess, 60s and 70s, early 70s. And police would have a young woman, for example, kneel on the ground, right? And they would take the ruler to see how high the hem of the skirt went from the ground. Now, perhaps in reaction to that, when I got to Korea in 1978, you got to remember, this was before I was blessed, all right? This was before I was blessed. When I got to Korea in 1978, I once told myself, and because women were either wearing pants or skirts that came below the knee. And so I told myself once, you know what? I may live the rest of my life without ever seeing a woman's knee again. Okay. This is before I was blessed, all right? I'm sorry. I was in my 20s, right? Okay. All right, let's move on. Okay. But I would not make any parallel comparison between Park Chung-hee and Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was irrational. Park Chung-hee was not. He did a lot for Korea's economy. He negotiated a reparation agreement with Japan, and in other words, reparations for the colonial past. And Japan paid a pretty hefty sum to Korea in the middle of the 1960s, and President Park, instead of using that money to line his own pockets or the pockets of his relatives, he invested that money in industries such as steel, such as airlines, such as shipping, such as automobiles, and also Samsung got some of that money as well. So many of the companies that are well known around the world, the Korean brands that are well known around the world today, owe their beginning to Park Chung-hee's enlightened, shall we say, enlightened economic management. And Korea in the 1960s was extremely poor. People were starving to death. But Park Chung-hee really set the stage for the economic advancement. So there's really no comparison between Park Chung-hee and Mao Zedong. So I disagree with this author on that point. In the Middle East, Arab monarchies in the Persian Gulf became much more conscious of delivering real economic benefits to the people following the Arab Spring in the early 2010s, which toppled long-time authoritarian governments in multiple countries while raising fears of similar protests and uprising elsewhere. And by the way, the police also carried around pairs of scissors. and they would give a instant haircut to any young man whose hair was deemed to be too long. It wasn't just the women. There is no guarantee that Iran's rulers opt for such a strategy. There is an ample scope for Iran to fall deeper into crisis as its elite, many of whom share the obstinate hardliner views of the supreme leader, double down on more repression and ultimately more violence against any sources of dissent. But should Iran's leaders decide to rescue their country from the spiral of chaos they have inflicted upon it, an opening may appear soon once Khamenei exits the stage. Well, but these guys, they tend to live a lot longer than people would like. Mao Zedong was, he lived much longer than he should have. That's for sure. But he stayed around, and he finally, of course, died in 1976, and he was buried just the beginning of September of 1976, just before Father's Madison Square Garden, or no, 1976, just before the Washington Monument event. And I remember Father saying in his speech at the Belvedere that Mao Zedong was being lowered into the ground just as Father was being lifted up. And he made that comment there, yes. Anyway, so Iran, what is going to happen with Iran? So it looks like Khamenei will have to pass from the scene, as they say. And of course, I don't know, maybe Delta Force can go in and help him out in that respect, help him to sort of pass from the scene a little more quickly. I don't know. It's not up to me. Okay. All right, we talked about the Board of Peace yesterday just a little bit, but it looks like today we have the actual names. This, I guess, is a photograph of Gaza. Can you imagine living in a place like that, right? And actually, I think these people have it relatively good. I think there are a lot of people who are in much worse condition than this. At least they have tents, and it looks like they're pretty well set up, although with tents. Yeah. And I don't know what they do for toilets. Maybe these are toilets, maybe that or something. I don't know. They would have to have some sort of a toilet situation. Yeah. But maybe that's what this is in the middle here. I don't know. President Donald Trump has unveiled key members of the Board of Peace, an international body he will lead to guide the second phase of his peace plan in Gaza Strip. The move marked a major step in the administration's push to stabilize the war-torn territory. Well, we could take a look at this. Oh yeah, so Blair is on the board, sure enough. Okay. President Donald Trump has unveiled key members of the Board of Peace, an international body he will lead to guide the second phase of his peace plan in the Gaza Strip. We already read that. The Trump named 7 members of the Board of Peace's executive board: Secretary of State Marco Rubio, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, former, I guess, yeah, it's not what you know, but who you know, right? The son-in-law, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, financier Mark Rowan, World Bank President Ajay Banga, and Deputy National Security Advisor Robert Gabriel. World Bank President. Okay. Each executive board member will oversee a specific area aimed at stabilizing Gaza and supporting its long-term future, including forming governing institutions, handling regional ties, directing reconstruction, attracting investment, and securing funding, according to the White House. Trump also appointed Aryeh Lightstone and Josh Grunbaum as senior advisors tasked with managing day-to-day strategy and operations and putting the board's priorities into action. The White House said executive board member Nikolay Mladenov will serve as high representative for Gaza, a high representative, right? Serving as the primary link between the Board of Peace and Gaza's transitional administration. And what's that going to be like? What's that transitional administration going to be like? Major General Jasper Jeffers was appointed commander of the International Stabilization Force, in other words, some sort of military force, I guess, and will be responsible for security operations, disarmament efforts, and ensuring the safe flow of humanitarian aid and rebuilding materials, according to the White House. Trump's announcement came as the U.S. advanced to the second phase of its Gaza peace strategy following the launch of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. The body, led by former Palestinian Authority Deputy Minister Ali Shaath. Okay, so Palestinian Authority is, of course, they're based up by the West Bank, and they've had very little to do with Gaza. So anyway, their Deputy Minister Ali Shaath is tasked with restoring public services, rebuilding civil institutions, and stabilizing daily life. Trump and his national security team said the second phase moves beyond enforcing. Come on now. Moves beyond enforcing ceasefire and instead focuses on disarming militants, establishing non-political administrators, and rebuilding the territory. Well, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes, and we wish them all the best. Although, I keep saying, but Father's long-term strategy is, intercultural and interreligious marriage. And so as long as you have two groups sort of isolated from each other and teaching their children to hate each other, to hate the other side, whatever President Trump is doing here is not going to be a long-term solution, that's for sure. We'll see, though. We'll give them our best, and we'll give them our prayers, and we'll hope that they can actually pull this off. Okay. All right, let's see what else we got here. It says Trump has backup plan if tariffs fail. In other words, we're still waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on whether his tariffs are legal. And it's possible that they will rule that they are not legal, and that they have to find some other way of doing the tariffs. And let's see here. The Nobel Committee in Norway says that even though Machado gifted her medal to Trump, it's still hers. Yeah, well, but they gave it to her, right? They gave it to her, so she can do what she wants with it. She could take it down to a local pawn shop and pawn it if she wants. But no, she decided to give it to President Trump. So I think the Nobel Committee, they tried very hard not to give it to Trump, and, and now they're sort of upset that she has undermined their efforts, their anti-Trump efforts. We already talked about the Trump cards. And say, okay, Bergam, Greenland, and Venezuela key to the Trump agenda. Right. And see the affordability. Trump rips Minnesota officials who have lost control. But now he's saying that he's not going to use the Insurrection Act in Minnesota. He said, apparently yesterday he said that there's no reason to use the Insurrection Act in Minnesota. Interesting. And so allow 401k for down payments. And, you know, he's instructing these semi-private, semi-governmental loaning institutions, Freddie Mac and Freddie Mae, to buy up $200 billion in mortgage-backed securities, right? And so what is that going to do? What is that going to do? Well, the idea is that this is going to put a cap on mortgage rates because you're you're taking sort of the well, you're taking uh, supply out of the market, and when you take a supply out of the market then of mortgages, then that means what? The price is going to go up, and when prices go up, what happens to rates? Rates go down because price and yield always go in opposite directions. But on the other hand, there is upward pressure on mortgages right now, and so right now, so mortgages are kind of the 10-year and 30-year bond rate, which is where mortgages are based, is sort of doing sort of a sideways in the market. So it may not be that the mortgage rates will go down, just that they will not go up as much as they would have otherwise. Now, if mortgage rates go down, what will happen? Well, then, of course, more people will say, "Oh, look, mortgage rates are down. Let's buy a home now. It's time for us to buy a home." And so there'll be more demand for homes, and more demand for homes will do what? Well, they'll drive up prices of new homes, or even of other homes. And also, people who are thinking of selling maybe will say, "Oh, look, mortgage rates are down, and this means that buyers can pay more because their monthly payment was going down. So that means that they can have a higher mortgage than they would otherwise. So this is a good time for us to sell." So we'll have to see what happens, but it may have unintended consequences. It may not drive down prices of homes, and President Trump is trying to address the issue that many people say that that homes are unaffordable, that other things are unaffordable. So there's this called the unaffordable crisis or something like that. I don't know if it's actually a crisis, but this is what they're calling it. And so he's putting out the 10% cards. He's having Freddie Mae and Freddie Mac purchase $200 billion in mortgage-backed securities in order to try and bring down mortgages. And what else is he doing? And the interesting thing, of course, is that he's always been pushing the Fed to lower rates, lower rates, lower rates. And now he's actually telling Freddie Mac and Freddie Mae basically to put $200 billion of money into the money supply. They're sucking up the mortgage-backed securities from the market and then putting money into the market instead. So increasing the money supply, which of course is going to do what? Well, it's going to create inflation. It's going to create inflation. But hey, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Yeah. Well, President Trump, I've sort of touched this in the past, but he he believes that his life was saved in Butler, Pennsylvania, for a purpose, for a mission, and he's a man on a mission. And so he is really testing the limits of presidential power and more. And he's just seeing what can I do before they actually stop me, before the courts stop me. And he's doing everything he can, in his understanding of what America needs uh, in the time that he has, and he's working as quickly as he can, both because he has a 4-year time limit, perhaps even less of a deadline if the Republicans cannot hold a majority in the House of this coming November. So he's doing as much as he can, just as fast as he can, every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. Yeah. But he believes that, and I think rightly so, that God is um, helping him, and as God is behind him, at least for the most part. So whatever he does that is connected to God, I think is going to succeed, and we'll see how God works with him in the time that he has. We'll see what happens in November. Of course, if the Republicans lose the majority in the House, as they may well do, then kind of all bets are off, I would say. Let's see where he is right now in the Rasmussen poll. He's been at 45, 46. Yeah, he's at 45, as of Friday. Okay. And 53 disapprove, 29 strongly approve of what he's doing, 45 strongly disapprove. This gives him a potential presidential approval index rating of -16. So yeah, right now, not as high as we'd like to see him, but he's really not paying too much attention to public opinion polls, and it's not too much. Instead, he's paying attention to what it is that he wants to do. And it's interesting that Powell won't do what he wants, and so he's taking control of the money supply himself. And so this is kind of a tug of war that's going on, by the way, between the Federal Reserve Board, and the Treasury Department under Scott Bessent. So who controls the money supply? And that's also a interesting tug of war. And if the Fed loses, then what will happen to its credibility, and what will happen to its continued existence? If President Trump succeeds in making the Federal Reserve Board irrelevant in terms of setting interest rates, what will happen to those 400 economic PhDs? Will they have to join the will they have to join the unemployment lines? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Okay, we can always pray. Yes, we can always pray. All right. Interesting to see what is happening right now. Yeah. All right, let's take a peek at Breitbart, see what they're doing this morning. Let me bring up Breitbart here for you. Let's see here. Ukraine delegation arrives in U.S. for peace talks amid hopes for final deal. Okay. Have they talked to Russia recently? I don't know. It doesn't sound like very much a final deal to me. Okay, House Dem whip on shutdown over ICE. Okay. And here, okay, so of course the government shutdown possibility is coming up now, and well, that's 2 weeks from now, and Democrats are going to try and use it to defund ICE, apparently, or at least to cut their funding to some extent. And we'll see what happens with that. Okay. And Emma Jo Morris says, Kathy Hochul, a scared animal in a cage, as Marxism sweeps New York City. That's Breitbart TV, so that's a video, so we're not going to look at that. And Florida Palm Beach County renames part of road after President Trump. Well, good for them. And Schweitzer says mass migration is a weapon for other countries. Yes, Schweitzer is an author who's been writing a lot about corruption in Washington, D.C. I don't want to do that one. Congress blocks dead people from getting Social Security. Whoa, how are they going to live? Oh, wait, they're not. Wait a second. How come they were getting Social Security in the first place? Here, in a video posted on X, John Kennedy, this is a Republican of Louisiana senator, explained that the Social Security Administration maintains a list of dead Americans called the Death Master File, and that's true. You know, what happens is that when a person dies in the United States, the funeral home, and the funeral homes deal with, I think, pretty much all deaths, right, one way or another. They are required by law to contact the Social Security Administration. Hey, we got a dead body here. So and so died. So then Social Security says, okay, we'll put them on the death master list. And Kennedy added that the SSA had not shared this information with other branches in the government. And then after he was informed that the Social Security Administration would need Congress's permission, he passed a bill called the Stop Improper Payments to Deceased People Act. Since the Stopping Improper Payments to Deceased People Act temporarily shared data, Kennedy went on to introduce a second bill titled Ending Improper Payments to Deceased People Act that would make this data sharing arrangement permanent. I've been working for years, literally years, to target welfare fraud, especially the fraudsters who conduct fraud in the name of deceased Americans, Kennedy said. In 2023 alone, for example, the federal government sent $1.3 billion, not million, billion. The federal government sent $1.3 billion to dead people. So somebody got that money, right? Somebody got that money. Probably, children or grandchildren or somebody like that. It's so pervasive that the Social Security Administration, which maintains a list of dead Americans known as the Death Master File, if someone dies, the state sends the name of the deceased person to the Social Security Administration, and that person's name is listed on what's called the Death Master File. We found that Social Security was not sharing this information. Okay, okay, all right. Okay, this week, I'm pleased to say the House passed my bill. The bill had already passed the Senate, and now it's passed the House. It's on its way to President Trump's desk, so he could sign it into law, right? Okay, then. Okay. And let's see what's going on here. Australia says 4.7 million accounts removed after ban on social media for children. Yeah, okay, they removed the accounts. We'll see how long it takes them to to bring them back. Yeah, it's kind of like their crackdown on gun ownership, I think. Yeah, it worked for a while, but then right now there's been an increase in gun ownership. The same thing, I think. Kids are going to figure it out. Yeah. Specialty chocolate recall. I have an interest in that. Expanded due to salmonella concerns. Oh no, don't tell me you're going to take away our chocolate. ICE agents arrest illegal alien drug drivers, drug traffickers, and burglars in Minnesota. Representative Feenstra introduces bill to block welfare recipients from sending money abroad. That seems to make sense. I mean, if you don't have enough money to live in the United States, and so you're on welfare because you don't have enough money, then yeah, why are you sending money abroad? I think that sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Potentially preventing individuals receiving public assistance from wiring money internationally, citing taxpayer abuse and recent high-profile fraud scandals as key motivations for the measure. No American Benefits Abroad Act. a bill that would prohibit individuals receiving public assistance from initiating international wire transfers. All right. We'll see how that turns out. Okay. Okay. So public assistance, right? And so then what else do we have here? Dishonest New York Times over gold standard pollution rules. What are gold standard pollution rules? And mm, mm, I don't know. Yeah. I think gold standard here does not mean actual, gold standard, but uh, the best standard. What it means here. Okay. Senior Iranian cleric calls for executing protesters and threatens Trump. Okay. Someone have the Delta Force telephone number? Yeah, maybe we need him. And ICE has become a lawless mob, says Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel was an Obama guy. He was very high in the Obama administration, and then he was high in Chicago, and then he was ambassador to Japan. And now I guess he's just trying to make himself relevant by saying things like that. Al Sharpton, he's still around. He looks like he's getting pretty old, doesn't he? He's still around. Also trying to keep relevant. And I think that's pretty much all that we can get out of Breitbart. I guess the Epic Times, I guess, huh? Epic Times. Are we going to get it? We're going to have trouble? Oh no, don't tell me we're going to have trouble with that. Oh, okay, we're connected. Okay, here we go. Okay. All right. Minnesota fraud cover-up reaches highest level of state government. Okay, we're not surprised by that. Exiled Iranian prince lays out plan to retake the country. So this is the son of the late Shah. And I think he would like well, maybe he's kind of the best among the many, many candidates, or at least when I say best, I don't mean the one that's most able type, but I mean the one that perhaps has most name recognition within Iran. We'll have to see. Okay. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to come out. But if they're going to do a reform within the system, then I don't think he's going to be one of them. And think tank says Iran protest mood appears to have died down for now. Okay. And Trump says no reason right now to use insurrect in Minnesota. Okay. And Trump says he left the Maduro regime in place to avoid the repeat of Iraq. Yeah, it's probably wise. Probably wise. I think U.S. sort of found a similar situation in Germany after World War II, right? So the denazification efforts, sort of threatened the stability of the country, and so they left a lot of people in place. Of course, at some point, though, right, you can keep them in place temporarily, but at some point, they have to be switched out with people who are going to do the right thing, and people who are not beholden to the past regime. And so it's kind of kind of a tricky situation, but I'm sure President Trump can get the country through that. All right, so that's about it. That's about it for today. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll be back not tomorrow. Tomorrow is Sunday, but I will be back on Monday with a new Heavenly Calendar month. So till then, God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.